Just after the election, 3 days after the election, a right-wing streaming network started airing a 6-part Russian propaganda special attacking the FBI. Now, I say it was a Russian propaganda special because, specifically, it was made by a producer who has made a living making propaganda for the Kremlin. One of the producers, the guy who financed and produced this film, this docuseries, this attack on the FBI, he has been paid by the Kremlin to produce videos that are designed to lure Westerners, including Americans, to leave the West and move to Mother Russia. That project was funded by the Presidential Foundation for Cultural Initiatives, which is a state entity created in the Kremlin by Vladimir Putin in 2021. This guy served on the board of a Russian propaganda outlet that was designed to look like an American news site. It was launched in the months leading up to our 2024 election. It was full of pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine content. This guy has produced hagiographic biographies of pro-Kremlin dictators, including, I kid you not, an 8-part series singing the praises of the dictator of Kazakhstan. And that was paid for by a charity controlled by the dictator of Kazakhstan. He also created a pro-Kremlin anti-Ukraine film that was paid for by a pro-Kremlin anti-Ukraine oligarch who has been under U.S. sanctions for more than a decade. He and his company produced another anti-Ukraine film last year that featured claims smearing President Biden that were delivered by a guy who is under indictment in this country and sanctioned by the U.S. government as a Russian agent. So this is kind of their oeuvre. This is what these folks do. But their newest, this multi-part anti-FBI documentary that came out 3 days after our election in November. It was directed by a former host from Russian state TV, which is sanctioned in this country as a vehicle for Kremlin-sponsored disinformation and disruption efforts targeting the American people in our elections. Now, at this point, you're thinking, okay, dog bites man, right? Some streaming outlet is running a pro-Russia, anti-U.S. government thing. Okay, right? I know you're thinking, this sounds very familiar. There's a lot of things like this. We know Russia runs all sorts of psychological and disinformation campaigns against us. A big, slick, Kremlin-affiliated propaganda operation against the FBI, something designed to smear the FBI. Yeah, that tracks. We know the kind of stuff that they do to try to mess with us as a country. The FBI probably knows to expect it. They probably know how to handle these kinds of operations and threats from Russia, as long as they're from Russia. Senate financial disclosure forms show that President Donald Trump's nominee to lead the FBI was paid $25,000 by the company with the producer who has made the Russian propaganda for the Kremlin, who made this new film attacking the FBI. Kash Patel was paid $25,000 by that production company, apparently for his participation in the anti-FBI film. Mr. Patel appears in the film. He's in episode 4. He also got an executive producer credit on the film as well. This was first reported today by the excellent investigative reporter David Korn at Mother Jones. But we can show you, this is from Kash Patel's required financial disclosure form to the Office of Government Ethics as part of his nomination to be the director of the FBI. Global Tree Productions. That's this production company run by this Russian-American propagandist who was part of the Kremlin-funded influence campaign to get Westerners to move to Russia, who sat on the board of the Russian propaganda site apparently designed to sway our election. Here's the record of their $25,000 payment to the man Donald Trump wants to put in charge of the FBI. That payment apparently pursuant to his participation in their anti-FBI documentary. We have reached out to Mr. Patel and to the White House and to the film producer for comment tonight. We have not heard back. I should tell you the Washington Post has also picked up this story tonight. A spokesperson for Mr. Patel did tell the Post tonight, quote, "The Senate has evaluated all potential conflicts and concerns." Have they, though? Have they?
The Democrats' opposition, we're not seeing a singular figure do that for the Democrats, at least not yet. Let's bring into this conversation now former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. He is director of the Institute for International Studies at Stanford and an NBC News international affairs analyst. And Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador, you've written a piece this week for the Dispatch asking this question: why is Trump trying to lose our new Cold War with China? In it, you write in part this: setting aside alliances, foreign aid, global trade, and military might, it is our democratic ideals that constitute one of our greatest advantages in competing with China in the 21st century, with polls from around the world finding that most people prefer democracy to dictatorship. American presidents worked with Congress to create Radio Free Europe, Voice of America, the U.S. Information Agency, the National Endowment for Democracy, and USAID to help us win that ideological struggle. We won the ideological competition with communism because most of the world agreed that freedom is better than tyranny and democracy is better than dictatorship. Shutting down American organizations like USAID and NED that support democracy, markets, and the rule of law helps the Chinese and their autocratic allies and hurts our democratic allies and partners. It's that simple. Mr. Ambassador, powerful words. We got, when USAID was on the brink of shuttering, we got feedback from Moscow. Dmitry Medvedev, Putin's puppet, previous president, cheered it, said Elon Musk was doing the right thing. Beijing's been a little more restrained in its reaction, but as you argue, they're probably cheering along as well.
Of course they are. And thanks for reading that passage. You know, the Trump administration, the first time around, they focused on the China and Russia threat. Their 2016-17 national security strategy focused specifically on this autocratic threat. Many of their senior officials talked about it. And I presume that then when they came back this second term, that they would be focused like a laser on China as the threat that the United States has to manage over the next decades. And that's why this is just baffling how distracting. And it's not, Jonathan, you said something very important. It's not just distracting and we're reacting to it. It's already damaging America's image in the world. When the president of the United States makes the comments that he made yesterday, that alienates not just our allies, but our partners, those that are sitting on the fence that now are tipping towards the Chinese. And I just finished writing a book, Lessons from the Cold War for How to Deal with China and Russia. And one of our big superpowers, two of our big superpowers then, were allies and our ideals. We had great allies, the Soviets didn't. We had better ideas, democracy is better than dictatorship. And yet President Trump so far, what is he doing? He's alienating our democratic allies, and he's not doing anything to support democracy. Just on the contrary, shutting down USAID. You know who shut down USAID in Russia when I was the U.S. ambassador? Vladimir Putin. He's doing what Vladimir Putin did in his country for the entire world.
We're the country telling small countries, including enclaves like Gaza, to do it. Oh, we're going to move here 2 million people. We're going to round you up against your will, and we're going to move you to wherever we'd like, some comfortable place, he's calling it. It sounds like some Indian trader or something from the Old West, some corrupt official cheating the Indians. I mean, we're not going to take them to some nice place. They want to stay where they are. Your thoughts?
Well, the whole Gaza thing is just ridiculous. It's not going to happen. But the bigger point you're making, I think, is really important. Trump is acting like a bully. He's acting like a gangster. He's acting like an empire, right? And with small countries, they don't have choices, right? Panama, Colombia, even Canada and Mexico, they can be coerced into doing things with a country like the United States of America because we have so much power. But they don't like it. They don't respect us for it. And the problem with that strategy today is that we're not the only superpower in the world. There's another superpower called China. And so when we bully those countries, they are eventually going to gravitate towards this other actor in the world. Maybe not Canada and Mexico, but other countries in the world. They have a choice. And that's why when President Kennedy created USAID in 1961, it was to counter Soviet foreign economic assistance in the world. Right now, the Chinese, it's called the Belt and Road Initiative. They're spending hundreds of billions of dollars to win friends around the world. If we don't spend anything, we lose to the Chinese. It's just that simple.
Folks, I come from this from a pretty unique perspective. I do not want to see necessarily the United States always be the most powerful country in the world. As a Canadian and as a progressive, I know that when the United States is too powerful, sometimes bad things happen because of it. So I approach this not as a jingoistic partisan of the United States. I want to make that clear. But it does seem like Trump is almost trying to weaken his own country. Look, again, I've talked about U.S. aid and how it's sometimes used to do bad things and sometimes used to do absolutely excellent things. I want to make that absolutely rock solid clear. But Donald Trump in all of his moves seems to be trying to empower his rivals, or at least the America's rivals and maybe his friends like Vladimir Putin, by sort of ceding the world stage to them, by retreating into the United States, right? That's what seems to be happening by cutting all of this funding. Vladimir Putin's got to be very happy because without spending a single dollar on his end, right? He now gets to increase his relative power because the United States is lowering their relative power. And guys, you gotta feel this is connected to their secret meetings. Trump was having secret meetings with Putin very recently. Lied about them in some cases. Secret phone calls and all of that. What were they talking about? Were they talking about Trump's plans for after a potential win? Have they talked since? Was Donald Trump talking about those stolen documents and what was in them? I don't know. But it's possible. Man stole thousands of documents, some of which were classified top secret, talking with his buddy Vladdy. And now he's weakening his country. I don't know if that's a coincidence.